Hands are tired, your soul feels worn, chasing the day since the crack of dawn. The mirror whispers, who have you become? A shadow of light or a rising sun? Reset your mind, reset your heart, hit the switch back to...
There is such a myth behind what it means to be strong and why we as caregivers can't keep doing it all. Caregivers are often labeled as strong, but the word often hides the exhaustion, the late nights, the silence, the pressure that builds. And in this episode, we're going to break apart the myth of strength and help to redefine the honesty, the support, and getting comfortable with asking exactly what you need. I remember the time that Zachary, our son, finally got his autism diagnosis. It was a 3-time opportunity. It went from, Zachary, for a little bit of background too, Zach is 7 now. He's not walking, not talking yet, in a wheelchair. And really to this day, doctors still don't know why. And I remember the first time we got the denial for an autism diagnosis, he was about 3 years old. And they, but by that time we still hadn't done any sort of genetic testing. We weren't, the pandemic was still kind of happening. I think that was around 21. And so we okay, sure. We'll figure it out. We'll keep turning over the other stones, right? No stone left unturned. And I remember feeling okay. We just got to bounce to the next doctor. I remember going through and trying, we were on wait list for the diet to get another evaluation. And I remember waiting probably, no lie, at least 10, 11 months, maybe a year to even get the appointment, with another 2 to 3 months in order to receive the results. And I remember that day where they turned to his dad and I and looked us straight in the eyes and said, "Your nonverbal child is too social to be autistic." And I remember I probably, if my partner wasn't there, I probably would have flipped the table and probably would have been escorted out of the doctor's appointment because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing after waiting for so long, after advocating, after fighting other denials in other realms of his world that I will probably go into in other episodes. But I remember questioning it, right? Remembering raising my voice and questioning and wondering and being so frustrated, right? Because what do you mean, right? What do you mean? And I remember vividly saying, put him in a room with his peers of the same age and see how he does, and see that how he's able to socialize. And that's not to say that Zachary isn't social. It's not to say, but we think about the systems. We think about all the things that caregivers have to push through, all the systems that are in place. We need certain diagnoses in order to access any services. And so we felt like this entire world was still closed in, that it still was not available to us. And so what do? But we stay strong. We stay strong and we push through. We push through and we make another appointment and we wait another 6 to 8 months. We pay another copay or we pay out of pocket so that we can get that third, fourth, fifth opinion. And I'm not exaggerating. And this was finally, we were able to see another doctor and ask, or not even ask. I almost feel like I had to bully them into the diagnosis, because I'm not only speaking for myself when I talk about this, but I run an online caregiver group where it's local to our state in Jersey. And we're always looking for resources. And like I said, you're calling resources and there's at least at minimum a 6-month wait list. And so let alone if they accept your insurance or not, if they accept the state insurance or not. And so finding those resources, and I felt very strongly, at that point, by the time we were at our third evaluation for an autism diagnosis, I was at my breaking point. I was no longer strong. And the reality is I was probably the strongest in that moment because I found my muscle to advocate. I found my muscle to push through and understand. And I remember telling the doctor, I am tired of walking out of here, being given a list of resources, thinking I'm ready to take my next step, having direction of what my next step should be, and it's a dead end. I'm speaking for myself. I'm speaking for the other caregivers and other parents that are in my community that feel the exact same way. And we are exhausted and we are tired. And so without having access to services that support children with autism and children with intellectual developmental delays, we have nowhere else to go. We don't have access to state resources. We don't have access to inclusive programming that's developed by the state or by nonprofits and other entities. At that point, we would have nothing. And so I remember when I could see her visibly shaking, and this is something that brings me so out of character, but I had no other choice because I was pushed to my limits. And I remember her excusing herself, bringing in a parent advocate, and bringing in another one of the doctors there. And I remember thinking to myself, here we go. They're not going to give him the diagnosis again. And we're going to be back to square one. It always feels like we're back to square one. And I remember them sitting down and saying, you know your child. Do you think he has autism? And I said, yep. And they were like, okay, we'll give you the diagnosis of autism. And the wail, the cry, hysterical. I fell to my knees. And I remember saying to myself, not even saying to myself, I'm glad the parent advocate was there, because I just hugged her and I held her and I just kept asking, why does it have to be this hard? Why did it take 7 years? 7 years where you're faced with this pressure of get him into services, do things while they're young. We were faced with the pandemic that closed everything down. His early intervention had 8 months virtually. What are you doing virtually to gain access to PT, OT, and speech? You know, you feel like those first few foundational years were stripped away, all because we didn't have diagnosis. And so I feel like we wouldn't have the diagnosis today if it wasn't for my strength, but in a strength that I had to pull from within. I had to pull aside, put my feelings aside and that's not who I am. I don't like to raise my voice. I don't like to feel like I have to corner people into getting things that I want. But I was given no other choice. I was going around circles and after circles, and that release, I felt like this is it. And we're still navigating, because we're still getting denials. Newsflash, sometimes it doesn't feel like it gets better, but that was one of the biggest hurdles that I had to get through. And I didn't and I'm the first one to say I didn't get through it alone. I have my partner, Zach's dad. He is fantastic, and he is my rock. He is someone and it's ironic because we come from different sides of the spectrum, where I'm a social worker, for those who don't know. And so I am literally a helping professional. That is, I have chose a career to be a helper. It is something that is instinctual for me. It is something that I've now mastered and am clinically licensed to do. And so I lead up until Zach. And in the very first couple years with Zach, I was leading with the mindset of, no, these agencies, these organizations, this is what they do. This is their mission. This is their goal, is to help people like our family, like our child. And he comes from questioning it on the other side. Why should they help us? And he says something really incredible. And I'm learning that, in a sense, that's true, that people help people, right? Organizations and systems, they're not really designed to help the way that we want and need to be helped. And it's understanding that we have to lean on one another. So if we find connections in the community, if we find resources that are valuable, that are actually what we need, that's where the strength comes from. It comes from the ability to be vulnerable, to be able to speak up and admit where you feel that you're falling short, not because it's a sign of weakness, not because it's, that you're dumb or you don't know, you don't know what you're doing. No, it's that someone has walked that step before you and can guide you. I am so paralyzed to this day. I'm still overwhelmed and confused and frustrated by all of the application processes that exist, only to then get a denial 6 months later, right? Because the decisions don't take a day, they take a couple months. And so you want to make sure you're doing it right in the first place. And you want to be able to ask for help and be able to, there's so many times when you don't know the resources that are out there, or resources that existed 10, 15, 5 years ago are not at the same caliber of delivery of service. We've been waiting for over 2 years for any sort of in-home support. And I'm grateful for the support that I do have, but how is that weighing on everyone else, right? When these so-called agencies are employing people that are supposed to help families like ours. And so remembering and reminding yourself and redefining strength as it's a way for us to ask and have the courage to ask for help, and that we're not meant to do this alone. We're meant to connect with others. And a friend once told me to get comfortable with, shifting your mindset of receive the help now so you can help others later. And I finally feel like I'm at a place where we are on stable ground and we have more direction, we have more understanding, we have even more acceptance to the journey that we're on. That took a couple years. And I feel like now I'm ready to help others in that capacity and in that space to be almost a source of connection, a source of understanding. Hey, I'm not going to have all the answers. But you might have some answers for me that I might have questions to. And that's part of it, right? Because there are still things that I don't know about. There are things that I'm still trying to navigate, but we're navigating it together. And so if you ever have any questions or have anything that's weighing heavy on you, or maybe you're hearing part of my story or someone else that's on this podcast that's sharing their story, and you want to share what your experience is like, please do. You're welcome to do that. You're encouraged to do that. We want to hear. So your reset for today is to place just a hand over your heart and repeat after me. I can't do this alone, and that's okay. Thank you so much again for listening to another episode of the Caregiver Reset, where your care deserves care too.
Reset your mind, reset your heart.